today we are going to discuss a very important subject, which is functional dyspepsia and its advances, most recent advances. And this functional dyspepsia is one of the commonest cause, like 60 to 70% causes of dyspepsia. And this functional dyspepsia is around 8 to 25% among general population of Asia. And one study of Bombay also says that each third person is suffering from this dyspepsia. So this is one of the most common condition which is for the physician. And now the diagnosis is also by exclusion of organic diseases. So it's very difficult, and treatment is also very resistant. So today we will know how to solve this problem by eminent speaker, Dr. Shubham Vatsya, who is now working as a consultant and PSRI. And he is one of the most educated person, you can say. He loves reading and educating people. And this is because from the beginning, if you'll see, in MBBS, he did from UCMS. And if somebody is getting one gold medal, we tell him as gold medalist. If more than three, then we tell him as brilliant gold medalist. But he has achieved 8 gold medal in MBBS time. And subsequently, he joined MD in Maulana Azad, where from he topped MD in university. And he did his DM from Jodhpur Government College. And his special interest is in therapeutic endoscopy, ERCP, endoscopy ultrasound, and especially in, you can say, luminal gastroenterologist he is. Now, without wasting time, over to Dr. Shubham for enlightening us this important topic.
Thank you, Srikanth sir, for such a kind introduction. Again, thank you, Chauhan sir, for one more opportunity. I would like to thank Richa, who has been working very closely with me from the Sun Pharma team for this webinar, and Mahesh ji and Rakesh ji, obviously. So what I'm going to talk about is functional dyspepsia. And I have attended quite a few talks, moderated a talk by Chauhan sir also. And this is a common topic on the forum. I've talked about IBS before, dyspepsia also. So I would start this by saying that dyspepsia is a constellation of symptoms, which means dys means dysfunctional, pepsia means the process of digestion. So dysfunctional process of digestion basically is the meaning of the word dyspepsia. And there are a lot of causes which can result in dyspepsia. So organic causes are the ones which we fear about, because dyspepsia can be a presenting feature of carcinoma stomach and esophageal malignancies sometimes as well, though rare. So it is important for us to catch these people. So like we talked about before, the red alarm symptoms are very important, and I'll highlight them. Which patient we think that an endoscopy should be done, or maybe some investigation should be looked into. So as I said, dyspepsia is a constellation of symptoms, and mainly referable to the gastroduodenal region, and common symptoms with extensive differential diagnosis and heterogeneous pathophysiology of difficult digestion. So dyspepsia is a group of symptoms. So the classical symptoms are early satiety, abdominal discomfort, vomiting, burning sensation in the upper abdomen, epigastric pain, abdominal fullness, and others. So possible causes of underlying dyspepsia would be functional dyspepsia, peptic ulcer disease, and infection with H. pylori. Now, this is a recent thing where Rome 4 classification identifies H. pylori as an independent cause of dyspepsia. Gastroesophageal malignancy, like I talked about. Gastroparesis, the most common cause and prevalent one being diabetes, which Srikanth sir will tell us better. Now, this is controversial. Gallstones per se don't cause dyspepsia. So I would rather mention that gallstones are per se, dyspepsia due to gallstones should not be an indication of cholecystectomy. I would treat this further, that if a patient is having dyspepsia, burning, symptoms of gastroesophageal reflux disease, and ultrasound says that the patient has gallstones, he should not be offered cholecystectomy for the relief of those symptoms. And yes, HCC sometimes can cause dyspepsia. So other causes which are common are drugs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, iron, calcium channel blockers, inhibitors, methylxanthines, steroids, chronic pancreatitis or pancreatic cancer, parasites, chronic military ischemia, Crohn's disease, and infiltrative disorders. So if you see overall in the differential diagnosis, up to 70% of these causes are functional or classical known as non-ulcer dyspepsia. Peptic ulcer disease is the second close one, which is 15 to 25%. GERD or reflux esophagitis is 5 to 15%. And gastric or esophageal cancer is less than 2%. The other ones are rare. So we are going to talk about the common ones today. So functional dyspepsia, the main challenge it from a organic dyspepsia, right? So functional dyspepsia over the last 2 decades, it is mainly a gut-driven disorder, and the diagnostic criteria is very important. So as Srikanth sir said, it is a diagnosis of exclusion. So one or more of the following symptoms must be present. So bothersome postprandial fullness, early satiety, epigastric burning, and epigastric pain. These are the classical symptoms of dyspepsia, and there should be no evidence of any structural disease, whether it be imaging, be it endoscopy, and these symptoms must be continuously present for 3 months with the initial symptom onset for at least 6 months prior. If we remember Chauhan sir in the last talk on IBS, I think 3 weeks ago, very categorically mentioned that recent do not go in the favor of a functional disorder. Right? If a patient has recent onset, going back to that friend of Chauhan sir where I diagnosed CA colon, he had recent onset constipation. So if a patient has recent onset dyspepsia, recent onset burning sensation in the upper abdomen, recent onset epigastric pain, which he says has never occurred before, then we should not think about functional dyspepsia. We should rule out other causes. So functional dyspepsia is subclassified into mainly 2 syndromes. One is the EPS or the epigastric pain syndrome, and the other is PDS or the postprandial distress syndrome. Epigastric pain syndrome mainly consists of pain or burning localized to the epigastric region with at least moderate severity, and the pain is intermittent. And PDS mainly consists of bothersome postprandial fullness occurring after ordinary sized meals at least 7 times per week, right? So maybe almost once a day. So there has been a slight change in the definition according to the Rome 4, the recent classification of functional dyspepsia. So if you see Rome 4 says postprandial fullness 3 or more days in the past 3 months with at least 6-month history, which was more than 1 day in Rome 3. So we have to look for 3, what do you call, the 3 days of, we need to have 3 days per week. And similarly in EPS, it is in Rome 4, it is different. That burning should be present at least 1 day per week in the past 3 months with at least 6-month history. So recent onset again should not be a feature of the patient who we are thinking about functional dyspepsia. So Rome 4 is also recommended, as I told you, it is a recent thing that H. pylori associated dyspepsia should be not called functional dyspepsia, as H. pylori has a classical cause of dyspepsia. So community-based studies published from Journal of Gastroenterology and Gut, they say that there is an overlap of postprandial distress and epigastric pain syndrome, and the overlap is classically varies from 15% to 35%, and the difference was mainly due to the difference in the community-based study or the population-based study. So this is basically a continuum in the way we are trying to diagnose a dyspeptic patient, whether it is an epigastric pain syndrome or a postprandial distress syndrome. It does not have any major what do you call implications for the prognosis of the patient, as both are functional dyspepsia, right? So pathophysiology of functional dyspepsia, I would like to say that dyspepsia basically is occurring because the stomach is not able to accommodate the food. So in the process of digestion, what happens is when we eat food, the food reaches the stomach by 2 kinds of peristalsis. One is the primary peristalsis, which occurs when the food is in the mouth. And the second is secondary peristalsis, which occurs when the food distends the esophagus. And then it reaches the stomach. The first step which occurs in the normal digestion is fundus of the stomach relaxes, which is known as receptive fundic relaxation of the stomach. So the relaxation of the fundus is very important. And then the second thing which occurs is in a period of 4 hours, almost 90% of the food which was taken in by us is emptied into the small intestine, right? So these are the two main mechanisms. If you see that the stomach is not able to empty in 4 hours, the 90% of it not being emptying, so there is delayed gastric emptying, so there is distension of the stomach. And the second is the fundus is not able to relax. So there is impaired gastric fundal relaxation or impaired accommodation of the gastric fundus to the meal. The other things might be enteral hypomotility, gastric dysapneas, and inflammation of the duodenum, which again, when the food reaches the stomach, there is mechanoreceptor dysfunction and aberrant processing of the input to the spinal cord or brain. So patients with dyspepsia have increased chemosensitivity. So as I told you in detail right now, that there is impaired gastric accommodation. The first part of the stomach which relaxes when food comes is the fundus. So reduce proximal gastric relaxation after meal. What is the most proximal part of the stomach? It's the fundus. So insufficient accommodation leads to increased intragastric pressure and activation of mechanoreceptors. And it is associated with symptoms of early satiety, and patient can have weight loss, but weight loss, again, I would not press on it, because if the patient has significant weight loss, which is defined as more than 10% body weight loss in the last 6 months, and the weight loss should be unintentional. So if there is significant weight loss, functional dyspepsia should be low in the list. Then there is delayed gastric emptying, as I said. It is again a major pathological mechanism with impaired gastric relaxation for functional dyspepsia. And 20 to 50% patients of functional dyspepsia have delayed gastric emptying. And most patients of these will obviously present with postprandial fullness or the postprandial distress syndrome. So mentioning H. pylori here because it is important, but as I said, H. pylori induced dyspepsia is known as true dyspepsia. You cannot call it functional dyspepsia if after eradication of H. pylori, dyspepsia persists post 3 months. So the mechanism is unclear with H. pylori, but there is altered smooth muscle dysfunction due to induction of inflammatory response, and the inflammatory response causes alterations in central nervous system. Another pathophysiological mechanism is altered gut microbiome, where this hypothesis is supported by the observation that symptoms are more likely to occur after an attack of acute gastroenteritis. So these are two terms which need to be understood. One is post-infectious IBS, and the other is post-infectious irritable bowel, functional dyspepsia, right? So the last thing is psychosocial function. As we know, functional disorders have a central component, the component of the CNS. That is why a lot of SSRIs, the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and the tricyclic antidepressants are very effective in this. So psychosocial dysfunction, complex interaction of psychosocial and physiological factors. Dyspepsia has been associated with general anxiety, somatization, and major depression. Patient with self-reported history of childhood abuse are also there. So symptom pattern, if we correlate, so delayed gastric emptying would result in postprandial fullness, nausea and vomiting. Hypersensitivity to gastric distension would result in epigastric pain, belching, and maybe weight loss, which is query. Impaired accommodation will result in early satiety and weight loss. H. pylori infection will classically result in epigastric pain. Duodenal acid hypersensitivity would result in nausea. Unsuppressed phasic contractility of the antrum of the stomach would result in bloating and absence of nausea. And atypical NERD would result in epigastric pain, right? So the most important things are delayed gastric emptying and impaired accommodation. So I would correlate pharmacologically. So the two main mechanisms of pharmacological treatment of functional dyspepsia are use of prokinetic drugs, which would help in fastening the gastric emptying. The most common prokinetic drugs we know about are domperidone, metoclopramide, levosulfide, right? These are the classical main, prokinetic drugs, which have a antagonism to the D2 receptor, the dopamine 2 receptor, and an agonism to 5-HT4. And the other main thing is impaired accommodation. So there was a new drug 5 years ago, it came into the market by the name of acosiamide, and 100 milligram TDS dose was very effective in dyspepsia, functional dyspepsia, because it used to basically correct the impaired fundic relaxation. So I'm just telling you the importance of prokinetics, treating pathophysiologically the delayed gastric empty, and levosulfide, the acosiamide type drugs, which help in improving the accommodation of the fundus of the stomach, right? So functional dyspepsia, a lot of things are biological, psychosocial, environmental, immunological in functional dyspepsia, and duodenal hypersensitivity, anxiety, depression, your pain modulating circuits, again, duodenal sensitivity, gastric accommodation, emptying, acid, diet, infections, all of these multiple things play a role. So approach to a patient with dyspepsia, I would I would take a little bit of time in explaining that you have to understand that functional dyspepsia is a functional disorder. That means there should be no organic disorder. And how do we suspect organic disorder? By the presence of red alarm symptoms. A patient having recent onset dyspepsia, that would be a red alarm. A patient more than 50 years of age would be a red alarm. A patient with family history of GI malignancy would be a red alarm. A patient having concurrent anemia, a patient having recurrent vomiting, a patient having what do you call palpable mass, all of these red flags should alert you that patient requires the diagnosis establishment of a structural or an organic cause of dyspepsia, right? The other thing is that GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease, very closely mimics functional dyspepsia. So the response to a PPI with GERD is very important, and functional dyspepsia classically will not respond because there is no reflux. So what is the best way to differentiate both of them? The best way would be a 24-hour pH metry. So I would very well tell you that how we do it is a patient who is not responding to PPIs in 12 weeks. So you have given the patient Sompras, or you have given the patient Pantocid, or whichever PPI over the counter. And after 12 weeks in a BD dose, the patient's dyspepsia or reflux symptoms, epigastric pain, are not responding. The best way in such a case is to do an upper GI endoscopy. And if you don't find any erosions in the lower esophagus, then maybe a 24-hour pH metry would help you. Now, as I have very learned physicians on the forum, I would tell you how an 24-hour pH metry works. So we use a probe by the nose and put it in the lower esophagus, right? In the lower esophagus, we give the, and then we give the patient something like this, right? So it has 4 buttons, up, 4 buttons down. What it does is, we ask the patient, जब भी आपको कोई भी दिक्कत होती है, जलन होती है, दर्द होता है, कुछ भी होता है, आपको 2 बटन दबाने हैं. ऊपर वाले बटन होते हैं, आप बैठे हुए हैं, खड़े हैं, लेटे हुए हैं, या कुछ और कर रहे हैं. मतलब you are sleeping and you wake up, right? So these are 4 options, and this is symptom according to them. So suppose the patient presses 4 times in a day कि इन 4 बार मुझे इस टाइम पे सिम्टम हुआ था. आप प्रोब के साथ एक लगा हुआ ब्लूटूथ सेंसर होता है, उसे पकड़ के देखते हैं. जिस टाइम पे सिम्टम आया था उस टाइम पे इसोफेगस में पीएच कितना था. 3 पॉसिबिलिटी हैं. जब सिम्टम आया था तब पीएच लेस देन 4 था, इसका मतलब है एसिड रिफ्लक्स हुआ, इसका मतलब है इस पेशेंट को जीआरडी है. दूसरा है कि पीएच मोर देन 4 था और पेशेंट को सिम्टम आया है, मतलब ये एसिडिक रिफ्लक्स नहीं है, ये नॉन एसिड रिफ्लक्स है, पर पेशेंट को सिम्टम हो रहा है. इस कंडीशन को हम बोलते हैं रिफ्लक्स हाइपरसेंसिटिविटी. और तीसरा है जिसमें पीएच चेंज ही नहीं हुआ, मतलब रिफ्लक्स नहीं हुआ ना एसिड का ना नॉन एसिड का, पर पेशेंट को सिम्टम आया. ये क्लासिकल पेशेंट है फंक्शनल डिस्पेप्सिया. मतलब रिफ्लक्स हुआ, एसिडिक रिफ्लक्स था जीआरडी, रिफ्लक्स हुआ, पीएच मोर देन 4 था, रिफ्लक्स हाइपरसेंसिटिविटी. रिफ्लक्स नहीं हुआ, सिम्टम आए, फंक्शनल डिस्पेप्सिया. So this is the most important thing I wanted to tell you, that it is very easy for us to treat dyspepsia with PPIs, with prokinetics, with fundus relaxation drugs. But patients not responding in 12 weeks of BD dose of PPIs, prokinetics, should ideally undergo an endoscopy. And further, if still we don't have erosive esophagitis on endoscopy, this is called 24-hour pH impedance spanometry and pH monitoring. This is the best way to establish functional dyspepsia, right? So physical examination would help you. Epigastric tenderness is common, but Carnot sign is a process where you ask the patient to tighten the abdominal muscles by raising the legs or raising the head, right? So if the pain decreases on raising the head or raising the leg, that means the patient has an intra-abdominal cause of pain. But if the pain increases, that means the pain is due to abdominal muscles. So the patient should have a negative Carnot sign, and you should rule out any abdominal mass or lymphadenopathy. Laboratory test routine can be carried out to see any anemia, any dysfunction in the liver function test. So again, repetition, sign and warning signs, red flags, GI bleed, unexplained anemia, early fullness, unexplained weight loss, progressive dysphagia, repeated vomiting, lymphadenopathy, GI cancer in first degree relatives, palpable abdominal mass. These are the classical things which I would say are red flags. I would add two to them. One is recent onset, and second would be age more than 50 years, right? So early upper endoscopy, the West says 55, but carcinoma stomach is way more common in India than in the West. So I would use 50 years. Gold standard for establishing a specific cause of abdominal pain, upper endoscopy would help. And biopsy should be obtained to rule out H. pylori. A rapid urease test can be done. If endoscopy shows no evidence of any organic disease, patient is labeled from suffering from functional dyspepsia. But ideally, functional dyspepsia should only be labeled after a 24-hour pH metry with impedance manometry, right? So treatment approach to patient with functional dyspepsia. So patient having epigastric pain or burning, early satiety or postprandial fullness. If the patient has alarm symptoms, you should refer the patient for an urgent upper GI endoscopy. If it is abnormal, you should treat the organic cause. If it is normal or there are no alarm symptoms and the local prevalence of H. pylori is more than 10%, like there is in India, you should do a non-invasive test, or you can test for H. pylori on upper GI endoscopy. If positive, you should treat with 14 days of what do you call, today we can give it to them, Sompraj HP, right? Our organizers. So local H. pylori prevalence more than 10%. If there is nothing such, you should ask the patient for postprandial distress syndrome, right? So the second variant of functional dyspepsia. If there is presence of postprandial distress, which means there is impaired relaxation of the fundus and delayed gastric emptying, you should give the patient prokinetic agents like acosciamide, domperidone, metoclopramide, or levosulfide. If it is successful, good. If it fails, you should try empirical acid suppression, as I told you. 4 to 8 weeks is a little early. I would say for 12 weeks. If it is a success, you would discharge. If it is a failure, again, I would say that I would prefer doing or giving an option to the patient of a 24-hour pH meter with an impedance manometry. But if there is failure, you can go for what do you call SSRIs or the TCAs, but you should classically avoid opiates for the fear of addiction, right? So talking about levosulfide, see, levosulfide is basically a prokinetic agent which is very similar to metoclopramide, domperidone in the D2 antagonism and 5-HT4 agonism. But the important thing is that CNS side effects are rare with this drug. They are reported extrapyramidal symptoms, but per se, the evidence is low. The main problem which I have faced, I think people around will tell, that long-term levosulfide use classically predisposes to galactoria. Now, I have seen a lot of patients which have even received the combination of PPI with domperidone, and they have resulted in the galactoria due to the peripheral D2 antagonism. So short-term use of levosulfide is genuinely safe, but I would prefer to say that long-term use, more than 12-20 weeks of levosulfide, should be avoided because of the main side effects of galactoria and endocrinological side effects. So again, comparing domperidone, levosulfide, metoclopramide, as you see that mainly levosulfide has peripheral D2 antagonism. So like metoclopramide, the extrapyramidal symptoms are rarer, though there are reports that they are still present. And again, this is the same thing. Levosulfide, they're extremely rare, what do you call, extrapyramidal side effects. And as we know, cisapride, mosapride was taken out of the market due to prolonged QT interval, or classically known as torsades de pointes. So today we don't have these drugs in the market, and QT prolongation is not seen with metoclopramide, domperidone, or levosulfide. So pharmacokinetics of levosulfide classically includes, it has a though the injectable drug is present, levosulfide, but we use in dyspepsia the oral drug, which has 30% bioavailability and a 10-hour half-life, and the drug interaction is pretty less likely with this drug, and it is mainly the peripheral action. So the penetration into the blood-brain barrier is not seen, and so there is low sedation, low incidence of epigastric pain syndrome, low risk of tardive dyskinesia, but it can act on the chemo trigger zone, so it can reduce the nausea and vomiting, right? So in the peripheral actions, it also levosulfide helps in constriction of the lower esophageal sphincter and increase peristaltic activity, and reduces the risk of reflux and heartburn, and it reduces the gastric emptying and reduces fullness and early satiety. So it is a D2 antagonist. So outside the chemoreceptor trigger zone, the blood-brain barrier, it inhibits it and helps in reducing nausea and vomiting. And there is a lot of data with levosulfide uh, in showing efficacy in dyspeptic patients, and the effect of acute and chronic levosulfide administration on gastric tone and perception in functional dyspepsia. Again, I would avoid chronic use of this drug. There is another drug by the name of etopride. I think I personally prefer etopride more in long-term use because of my 8, 10 or around more than 5 patients who have experienced galactoria, and it becomes a little, what do you say, embarrassing for the female patients, right? So there is definite efficacy. It is there is a p-value less than 0.05, statistically significant role of levosulfide in reducing symptoms in dyspeptic patients, and levosulfide has reduced duration of dyspeptic symptoms and improved quality of life. It is well tolerated, and there were no side effects in these participants of the study. Further data suggests that randomized controlled trials have suggest double blind that levosulfide is definitely effective in dyspeptic patients, and it is a very good drug. I'm not taking anything away from levosulfide, but I would further say avoid using it chronically for more than 12 weeks for the side because of the side effect of galactoria. And so 10 days, yes, if you are using it for 10 days, then definitely it is a very good drug. And you talk about, see, this is what I was talking about. So galactoria as a side effect with levosulfide is highest among metoclopramide, domperidone, and the others. However, and breast tenderness also. So long-term use, again, I would, particularly in female patients, I would avoid. And there are, see, menstrual changes also. There is increased prolactin level is highest seen with levosulfide. So there are menstrual changes as well. And the other things are rare with levosulfide. Lot of trials have gone starting from 96 to 2015, which have suggested the efficacy of levosulfide. And I would like to conclude this study with, again, a very important flowchart which we had added. I would again repeat this as one of the last slides I want to talk about, or maybe summarize whatever I said. So we have to remember difficulty in digestion presents with a lot of variety of symptoms. The classical symptoms are pain in the upper abdomen, epigastric pain syndrome of functional dyspepsia, and postprandial abdominal bloating and tightness, which is postprandial distress syndrome. But we should remember functional dyspepsia is the most common cause of dyspepsia out of all causes, but functional dyspepsia will not kill a patient. We should not miss an organic cause of dyspepsia. For that, the best thing is the red alarm symptoms. Always remember the red alarm features of old age, recent onset of symptoms, presence of anemia, recurrent vomiting, presence of lump, presence of lymphadenopathy, GI bleed, any lump. So these are very important things to keep in mind. Presence of alarm symptoms, always go for an upper GI endoscopy. I would say go for imaging as well, right? Rule out malignancy of the stomach. Any dysphagia is there, upper GI will help you rule out CA esophagus. H. pylori should be treated in dyspeptic patients. Postprandial distress syndrome should be treated with prokinetic drugs. And if still you think it is functional dyspepsia, the use of TCAs, SSRIs for 3 months gives us very good results. So I would like to conclude my talk here. I hope, and I would also summarize one more thing again. Epigastric pain syndrome, functional dyspepsia, if it is really resistant, you have given the patient PPI with prokinetics for 12 months, maybe SSRIs as well, patient is not responding. A very good thing available with us gastroenterologists is 24-hour pH metry with impedance manometry, where we give the patient something like this. We put a catheter into the lower esophagus. We ask him to press a button whenever he has symptoms. Presence of symptoms, no change in pH, functional dyspepsia. Presence of symptoms, pH less than 4, GERD. Presence of symptoms, pH more than 4, reflux hypersensitivity. I would rest my case here with functional dyspepsia. Thank you for your patient listening. And thank you, Rakesh ji, Richa, Mahesh, Thank you, Shrikant sir. Thank you, Chauhan sir.
Thank you very much.
Can I request Dr. Shrikant to interject, to come in, and to
Yes,
take
sir.
all the questions and to have those questions answered? Dr. Shrikant, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm there, sir.
Yeah,
And
Dr.
first of all, I
Shrikant.
thank Dr. Shubham for enlightening.
Dr. Shrikant is shining like a bright star in a dark
No, no,
sky.
because light is not there. So under
You are
candle
still
we are
shining,
working.
sir. You are still shining, sir.
So I was telling that first of all, I will congratulate and Dr. Shubham for a nice and very beautiful learning about telling all the red flag signs and when to do endoscopy, and very swiftly and very nicely he has taken us how to treat the patient as well, which is a very difficult topic if you will read in the books. So now over to the August audience for any questions.
Yes, Dr. Shrikant, Dr. Poddar.
Sir, namaskar.
Yes, Dr. Shubham, you said functional dyspepsia is a diagnosis of exclusion. So, and you also said that without red flag signs, you can start the treatment. So that means without a proper diagnosis, if there are no red flag signs, you can start the treatment considering it as a functional dyspepsia?
Sir, I think very good question, but I would like to say that the important thing is absence of red flags is an indicator of absence of organic cause of dyspepsia. That is what I mean to say. A 30-year-old male or female walking into the OPD with dyspeptic symptoms, having symptoms long standing for more than 2 years, episodes coming, and having no anemia, no vomiting, no GI bleed, no family history of GI malignancy, I think he or she does not require an endoscopy to start treatment.
So in a young patient, you are justified to give empirical treatment. And if there is no improvement, maybe on 12 weeks, then you will do an endoscopy. And if there are red flag signs, then you will do endoscopy earlier. That's
Mota, sir, yes.
Yes, sir.
And then,
yes, sir. As Dr. Shubham told, if recent origin and if the age is more than 50 and if the red flag signs are there, then endoscopy is a must. If these three things are not there, then you can go for
Empirical
clinical management.
Yes.
Recent means first time onset in above 50, then you will, it's a red flag
Sir,
sign basically.
I think a 30-year-old male coming with dyspepsia only for 5 days, he has never had it before. I will go for an upper GI endoscopy.
In 30-year-old also?
5 days symptoms, no symptom pehle. So he is not functional dyspepsia. Sir, functional dyspepsia की Rome 4 classification में वो कहते हैं epigastric pain या postprandial distress 3 दिन हफ्ते में एटलीस्ट 3 महीने के लिए, जब सिम्टम ऑनसेट 6 महीने पहले हुआ था.
If patient is young and first time हो रहा है, तो how will you say Rome criteria? How will you justify? Patient को second time होगा, third time होगा, then you will consider only Rome criteria, ना?
सर वही तो मैं कह रहा हूँ, तो वो फिट नहीं हुआ ना फंक्शनल डिस्पेप्सिया में. वो फंक्शनल डिस्पेप्सिया नहीं है. जिसको पहली बार डिस्पेप्सिया हो रहा है 5 दिन का, he is not by definition functional dyspepsia.
अगर 2 दिन का है तब?
सर ये तो बहुत वो हो गया, दवाई देके देख लेंगे आप, 10 दिन बाद बुला लेंगे उसे. बट आप बताओ ना,
अप्रोच अगर पेशेंट को अप्रोच करेंगे, किसी भी आ रहा है और उसको अप्रोच कर रहे हैं अपन, तो GERD और ड्रग इंड्यूस्ड डिस्पेप्सिया बहुत कॉमन है. इसको एक्सक्लूड कर देंगे और साथ में अगर एज और जो रेड फ्लैग साइन है उसको एक्सक्लूड कर देंगे, तो वी कैन ट्रीट डायरेक्टली. बट फंक्शनल डिस्पेप्सिया का बाय डेफिनेशन है chronic disease. It's not an acute disease, it's a chronic disease.
Let us go to the next question. So, Dr. Shubham,
5 दिन 6 दिन, एक मिनट डॉक्टर पोदार, जो 3 दिन 4 दिन 5 दिन 6 दिन का जो शॉर्ट ड्यूरेशन का आएगा, उसमें कुछ ऑर्गेनिक को खोजना है. बोलने का मतलब ये है कि कुछ ऑर्गेनिक डिजीज उसमें आपको खोजनी है. छोटी छोटी इन्वेस्टिगेशन आप उसमें करा सकते हो, जैसे अल्ट्रासाउंड हुआ, जैसे एंडोस्कोपी हुआ. अगर आपको सपोज 5-7 दिन हो गया और ठीक नहीं हो रहा है, you never know what he is suffering from. then you can go for the endoscopy or ultrasound. और अगर आपको ज्यादा फैमिली हिस्ट्री भी साथ में है तो ऑकल्ट ब्लड भी एक स्टूल में कर सकते हो. These are the essential 3 things which you can go for.
Right. Okay, Dr. Srikant. So can we give empirical treatment for H. pylori also without endoscopy?
So H. pylori अगर 10% से ज्यादा प्रिवेलेंस है उस एरिया में, then you can go for either breath test or stool antigen test. If they are present, yes, you can go for it. If they are negative, you should. This is
A
what
lot of
literature says.
disturbance is there.
I think कुछ लोगों की बैकग्राउंड वॉइस वो खराब कर रहा है.
Can I request Mr. Rakesh ji and the technical team to mute everyone else except the speaker and the person who is asking the question? Can you mute everyone else, please?
I'll just do that.
There is lot of background music coming. What is cooking? What is there for the dinner? Okay. So I am feeling very hungry. Rakesh ji, please mute everyone else. Otherwise, I'll feel tempted to close the session and go for dinner.
सर करवा रहा हूँ. Okay.
मतलब क्या करवा रहे हैं? डिनर करवा रहे हैं? क्या करवा रहे हैं?
Sir, it's an open thing. Choice is yours. मैं तो mute करवा रहा हूँ.
अभी म्यूट करवा दीजिए. ना रहेगी बांस, ना बजेगी बांसुरी.
Oh, my question was for empirical treatment for H. pylori. Yes.
Sir, as I told, empirical treatment, suppose some patient is with dyspepsia, then if prevalence is more than 10% in that area, then you will go for stool antigen test or breath test. If they are positive, then you go for H. pylori treatment. This is what literature says.
Yes, but I would like to tell you very important thing, sir. Stool antigen test and H. pylori serology, you can do these. They are not helpful in eradication of H. pylori. Even after treatment, stool antigen test can come positive. More than 10% prevalence is established by serology, as Srikant sir would say, as per Harrison. So serology will be same because they are antibodies. It's like Vidal coming positive and we telling the patient that you have typhoid.
Yes.
So serology will not help. Antigen test will not help in eradication. So empirical treatment is okay. But if you want to establish the eradication of H. pylori, then you require a UBT, which is urea breath test, or you require a rapid urease test with endoscopy.
Right. Thank you. Somebody else can ask.
For recurrence, it will not be useful also.
Yes,
Or
sir.
suppose there is recurrence, it will not be useful.
Yes, sir.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Hello, may I ask the question now? Dr. Aniruddha speaking.
Sir, sir. Namaskar, sir.
Namaskar. Hello.
Hanji, sir. We are able to hear you, sir.
Doctor, you told about this galactoria part. Now I'm bringing out a very, very important thing. A galactoria, a woman will know that she's having a problem. But a male person, actually, this levosulfide is acting on the D2 antagonism and hence raising the prolactin. And by virtue of raising the prolactin, it decreases the testosterone level in and male person. You will not never come up to. So it goes on.
आवाज नहीं आ रही, सर.
अब आ गई?
हाँ, आ रही है, बीच में जा रही है, सर.
मैं ये कह रहा हूँ कि जो गैलेक्टोरिया प्रॉब्लम है ना,
मेल आदमी को पता नहीं लगेगा कि उसका प्रोलैक्टिन बढ़ गया है.
हाँ, वो तो डॉक्टर गैस्ट्रोएंटरोलॉजिस्ट के पास जाएगा नहीं, उसको लिबिडो कम हो गया, वो उसको पता भी नहीं लगेगा कि मैं लिवोसल्फाइड ले रहा हूँ उसकी वजह से. वीमेन तो फिर भी आ जाएगी क्योंकि उसको पता है गैलेक्टोरिया हो रहा है. तो इसलिए जो मेल के livosulfide, that is a bigger problem.
Sir,
because of the increased prolactin, decrease in the testosterone level, decrease in libido.
Sir, श्रीकांत सर, मैं पहले लूंगा, फिर आपको मेरी हेल्प करनी पड़ेगी. तो पहली बात तो ये है कि मैंने बहुत अच्छे से आप इसीलिए बोला था 12 हफ्ते से ज्यादा लिवोसल्फाइड देनी नहीं है, क्योंकि जो प्रोलैक्टिन को इफेक्ट करता है वो मेनली 12 वीक्स के बाद आता है. और अगर आपको हल्का सा भी डर है, आप लिवोसल्फाइड मत यूज करिए, आप इटोप्राइड यूज करिए. इटोप्राइड का D2 एंटागोनिज्म नहीं है. इट हैज सिलेक्टिव 5-HT4 एगोनिज्म एंड इट इज अ प्रोकाइनेटिक अगेन. बट आई एम कंफ्यूज्ड विद द बेसिक थिंग दैट प्रोलैक्टिन और टेस्टोस्टेरोन में क्या रिलेशन है. अब एमडी करने के बाद मेरा थोड़ा एंडोक्राइन से थोड़ा डिस्टेंस हो गया है. तो श्रीकांत सर, डज रेज प्रोलैक्टिन डिक्रीज टेस्टोस्टेरोन? मेरे को जहां तक याद है कि प्रोलैक्टिन हैज अ फीडबैक इफेक्ट, मतलब टीएसएच और टीआरएच से लेना होता है उसका.
नहीं सर, ये तो बिल्कुल पक्का है सर. सर इसमें कोई डाउट नहीं है बिल्कुल भी. प्रोलैक्टिन डिक्रीज टेस्टोस्टेरोन, इट बिकॉज़ प्रोलैक्टिन एक्ट्स ऑन द मेल गोनेड्स एंड डिक्रीज, इसमें कोई डाउट नहीं है सर.
मैं इसलिए एक्सपर्ट सर से एक बार पूछ रहा था कि मतलब वो चीज कवर कर दें.
प्रोलैक्टिन जब भी
श्रीकांत।
बढ़ेगा बाकी सारे हार्मोन को कम करेगा. दिस इज फर्स्ट. जितने पिट्यूटरी हार्मोन है, प्रोलैक्टिन कम होगा तो बाकी बढ़ेंगे, या कोई भी एक बढ़ेगा तो प्रोलैक्टिन को कम कर सकते हैं, या प्रोलैक्टिन बढ़ेगा तो बाकी को कम करेगा. ये तो एक पोर्शन हो गया. बाकी जो गायनेकोमास्टिया वाली बात है, जब भी पेशेंट लिवोसल्फाइड ले रहा है और अपने पास आ रहा है तो उसको एक क्वेश्चन जरूर पूछना है कि हाँ उसकी सेक्सुअल ये लाइफ कैसी है. एक पोर्शन ये है. सेकंड ये है कि always it will not make high prolactin, because only around 10% of the people will suffer from this. 90% will not suffer from this.
Yes.
The reason being this is D2 inhibitor. D1 और D2 में क्या अंतर है? वैसे D1 to D5 5 होते हैं, तो D1 और D5 सेम काम करते हैं, D2 3 4 ये सेम काम करते हैं. तो D1 और D5 जो D1 जो होता है वो मैक्सिमम ब्रेन के अंदर होता है, मिड ब्रेन में स्ट्रैटम में. सो वो ज़्यादा गैलेक्टोरिया के साथ में संपर्क रखता है. बट अगर D2 स्पेसिफिक है तो दिस विल वर्क पेरिफेरली और एट CTZ. CTZ में अगर है तो वो ब्लड ब्रेन बैरियर को क्रॉस करके नहीं जा सकता है. सो इसलिए अगर जितना ज़्यादा स्पेसिफिक होगा D2 के साथ में उतना कम प्रोलैक्टिन को ज़्यादा करेगा. इसलिए दिस इज स्पेसिफिक. लिवोसल्फाइड इज टोल्ड टू बी वेरी स्पेसिफिक for D2. So practically, theoretically, it should not cause this galacturia. But practically, it has been seen कि 9 से 10% के आसपास लोगों को ये करता है. तो इसलिए थोड़ा सा ये सावधानी बरतनी है कि 10% कर रहा है तो 90% को नहीं कर रहा है. तो जब भी आए पेशेंट एक बार पूछ रही है, भाई हाउ इज योर लिबिडो? इफ लिबिडो इज ऑल राइट वी कैन कंटिन्यू दिस, देयर विल बी नो प्रॉब्लम.
Yes sir, thank you sir.
No, he question was whether it reduces testosterone, high prolactin. This was the question.
Sir, indirectly it may. You
may.
cannot say yes, but indirectly
Directly
it may.
सर हाइपरप्रोलैक्टिनिया
हाई टेस्टोस्टेरोन को, और प्रोलैक्टिन जब बढ़ेगा तो LH कम होगा, और LH सफिशिएंटली कम अगर हो गया तो टेस्टोस्टेरोन को कम कर देगा. पर इतना सफिशिएंटली कम होगा बोल के चांसेस कम होती है.
सर वो 1000 पिकोग्राम पर ml से ज्यादा चाहिए होता है ना LH सप्रेस करने के लिए उसको. मतलब जनरली ड्रग इंड्यूस्ड जो होते हैं प्रोलैक्टिन लेवल्स वो 1000 तक नहीं पहुंचते. यही हैरिसन में पढ़ते हैं, शायद वो प्रोलैक्टिनोमा चाहिए होता है उसके लिए.
यूजुअली 200 से 200 से ज्यादा नहीं करता है. प्रोलैक्टिन के लिए 200 से ज्यादा चाहिए. यूजुअली प्रोलैक्टिन जो ड्रग से बढ़ता है वो 60 70 80 के आसपास बढ़ता है. अगर 200 से ज्यादा जब भी बढ़ रहा है तो हम लोग उसको पिट्यूटरी का MRI करने के लिए एडवाइस करते हैं. ड्रग इंड्यूस कभी भी हमारे पास आता है गैलेक्टोरिया, अगर प्रोलैक्टिन करने से 200 से ऊपर जाता है तो हम उसका MRI के लिए एडवाइस करते हैं, because this is unlikely that it will go more than 200 if it is drug induced.
सर व्हाट आई एम ट्राइंग टू से, हाइपरप्रोलैक्टिनिया का वन ऑफ द सिम्टम्स इन मेल इज डिक्रीज लिबिडो एंड डिक्रीज सेक्सुअल फंक्शन इन मेल.
यस सर,
इट इज नोन फैक्ट. हाँ
एग्रीड, बिल्कुल सही है, कोई दिक्कत नहीं.
तो डिस्पेप्सिया में वापस आ जाए ना हम लोग. प्लीज आई गॉट अ क्वेश्चन.
सर नमस्कार.
नमस्कार. So the thing is, can we join sucralfate along with this thing for fundal?
Doctor का meeting है.
Would you like to join sucralfate with the pro?
कहाँ से जुगाड़ कर ली?
Fundal relaxation.
कहाँ?
राकेश सर म्यूट करना पड़ेगा आपको, ये वॉइस पीछे से आ रही है बैकग्राउंड से कुछ. सर दोबारा बोलिए सर, सॉरी सर.
अल्फा का डॉक्टर है ये.
अच्छा. For the fundal effect, when there is lack of motility, there will be a regurgitation of.
राकेश जी, आपने डॉक्टर सुनील कपूर को ही म्यूट कर दिया.
अरे कपूर सर को तो अनम्यूट करो.
Oh,
सवाल पूछ रहे हैं.
nice. You're getting my point?
सब म्यूट होंगे तो अब जो बोल रहा है he will have to unmute himself.
अच्छा,
I
okay.
unmuted myself. So my thing
Yeah.
is, can we add sucralfate to the combination of prokinetic agents for a better effect?
सर
especially
पहली
on the
बात
fundus?
सुक्रालफेट का मैकेनिज्म है पॉलीमराइजेशन टू कोट द म्यूकोसा to prevent it from acid.
Okay.
For that, sucralfate polymerization requires pH less than 4.
Acha.
So conceptually, a PPI and sucralfate should be at least 8 hours apart,
Okay.
because PPI will raise the pH above 4 and above 4 sucralfate cannot polymerize.
Polymerize.
दूसरा,
What about sorry? The prokinetic.
sucralfate का मैकेनिज्म है बैरियर इफेक्ट ऑफ म्यूकस को स्टमक को कोट करना. सुक्रालफेट प्रोकाइनेटिक एजेंट नहीं है.
I know that. Yeah.
सुक्रालफेट फंडस रिलैक्सेशन में हेल्प नहीं कर सकता. बट यस, अगर एसिडिटी सिम्टम्स हैं ज्यादा तो हम बैरियर फंक्शन को इंप्रूव करने के लिए ओडी डोज में दिन में पीपीआई सुबह देके शाम को सुक्रालफेट दे सकते हैं, so that both of them are spaced out for maximum effect. Giving both of them together will inhibit the polymerization of sucralfate in the gastric mucosa.
With prokinetics, I mean, what do you do with prokinetics? Can you use it? Because if there is no motility, there will be acid collection in the stomach, and that
Yes,
is
sir.
called
So,
ulcers there.
yes, sir, delayed gastric emptying and hypomotility is a known cause of functional dyspepsia, and prokinetics are the agents of choice for
Right.
the what do you call, the postprandial distress syndrome, and levosulfide, etopride, these are the classical agents we use for the same.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
डॉक्टर शुभम का बोलना ये है कि पहले आप अगर H पाइलोरी नेगेटिव है और आप एंटीबायोटिक नहीं दे रहे हैं तो आउट ऑफ द टू पहले प्रोकाइनेटिक आप यूज कर सकते हैं. इफ नॉट सक्सेसफुल देन यू कैन गो फॉर दिस पीपीआई और एसिड सप्रेशन ड्रग्स लाइक सुक्रालफेट. सो फर्स्ट ये में यू कैन यूज प्रोकाइनेटिक फॉलोड बाय द अदर वन.
Yes, sir. बिल्कुल.
Dr. Subham, can we use prokinetic for reflux, not PPI first? First drug for reflux, can't we use prokinetic, lesuride?
नहीं सर, बिल्कुल नहीं. मतलब पर से बाय अमेरिकन कॉलेज ऑफ गैस्ट्रोएंटरोलॉजी 2019 गाइडलाइन के हिसाब से बिना पीपीआई के आप जीआरडी ट्रीट नहीं कर सकते, क्योंकि सर अगर पेशेंट को एसिडिक रिफ्लक्स है और आप पीपीआई दे रहे हो, वो रिस्पॉन्ड नहीं कर रहा, तो आपको एक रेयर डिजीज होती है एकिलेजिया कार्डिया, जिसमें नॉन एसिड रिफ्लक्स होता है. नॉन रिस्पॉन्स ऑफ एसिडिटी टू पीपीआई इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टू एस्टैब्लिश एन ऑर्गेनिक डिसऑर्डर ऑफ एकिलेजिया एंड अ फंक्शनल डिसऑर्डर ऑफ फंक्शनल डिस्पेप्सिया, क्योंकि दोनों में ही एसिडिक रिफ्लक्स नहीं है. तो प्रोकाइनेटिक एजेंट पहले देना कॉन्सेप्चुअली मेरे हिसाब से और गाइडलाइंस के हिसाब से सही नहीं है. फॉर जीआरडी पीपीआई इज द एजेंट ऑफ चॉइस.
No, what I am telling is prokinetic in functional dyspepsia.
वो बिल्कुल सही बोल रहे हो सर.
Dyspepsia first is to be prokinetic followed by acid suppression.
नहीं, आप तो सही बोल रहे हो. सर का सवाल था कि पेशेंट को जीआरडी में प्रोकाइनेटिक्स देने चाहिए पीपीआई के पहले. वो मैं एग्री नहीं करता, ना गाइडलाइंस एग्री करती.
नहीं, वो तो गाइड सब गाइडलाइन में यही है कि पीपीआई यू हैव टू गिव फर्स्ट.
But along with PPI, you can give prokinetic along with PPI?
सर दे सकते हो, बट प्रोकाइनेटिक तभी हेल्प करेगा जब पेशेंट की मोटिलिटी खराब है. अगर उसकी गैस्ट्रिक एम्प्टिंग नॉर्मल है और वो मोर देन 90% गैस्ट्रिक एम्प्टिंग कर रहा है 4 घंटे में, तो प्रोकाइनेटिक का काम भी वही है. So there has to be an element of suspected postprandial distress due to reduced fundus relaxation, impaired gastric accommodation, or reduced antral motility or delayed gastric emptying. And the second thing which I think is very important is हम तो पढ़ते थे, मतलब diabetic patients with dyspepsia, prokinetics are definitely going to help, because uncontrolled diabetes over a period of 10 years is prone to gastroparesis. Or sir, Srikanth sir, what is the present role of erythromycin in these people, diabetics with dyspepsia long standing?
डायबिटीज में ऑटोनोमिक न्यूरोपैथी होकर के होता है, सो दैट्स व्हाई इट्स डिलेड. सो प्रोकाइनेटिक का रोल है. एरिथ्रोमाइसिन का भी प्रोकाइनेटिक के जैसे ही काम करता है, इसलिए रोल है कि एंडोस्कोपी करने के पहले मत दो या इस टाइप से पहले बताते थे. पर आजकल ये बोल रहे हैं कि न्यू स्टडी सेज दैट वी कैन देयर इज नो रिलेशनशिप बिटवीन एरिथ्रोमाइसिन एंड दिस थिंग.
हम पढ़ते थे सर, इसलिए याद आ गया मेरे को एकदम, तो मैंने कहा पूछूं आपसे.
Dr. Shrikant, can I ask a question, sir?
Yes, sir.
Sir, what is the role of probiotics in functional dyspepsia?
Actually, role of this gut microbiota is there because this was proved because any time when there is loose motion or kind of gastroenteritis, that time this dyspepsia is more. This aggravates. So that's why the new thought is the microbiota also causing this functional dyspepsia. And
Is there a role of dietary modification, sir?
Yes,
Is there
yes.
a role of dietary modification in functional dyspepsia?
Sir, I was coming to that. So probiotic ka role is there. One. Two, dietary, as per diet is concerned, if somebody is taking more fatty diet, then it will increase. So if you take small amount of diet multiple times and you are taking less of fatty diet, then it will make some difference. It will be better. Plus, one should avoid any carbonated drinks like Pepsi and all. With that, coffee, tea, alcohol, this also precipitates. So that's why they say that you should avoid this. And few of our eating things like tomato, like chocolate, which will decrease the tone of lower this esophageal gastric tone. So the reflux will be more. So they say if you avoid this thing, and mint helps, mint and caraway, kala jeera. These two things helps in this dyspepsia. So one can take as a home remedy these two.
Your comment, Dr. Shubham?
सर परफेक्ट. मेरे को तो लग रहा है मैं गैस्ट्रोएंटरोलॉजिस्ट को सुन रहा था किसी को. एक्चुअली सर डाइटरी मॉडिफिकेशन इज अ प्राइमरी ट्रीटमेंट lifestyle modification both in GERD and functional dyspepsia. So excess fat, excess alcohol, coke or aerated drinks, sodas, and sir said chocolates, all of these decrease the pressure of the lower esophageal sphincter, which predisposes to acid or non-acid reflux, and in a way predisposes to symptoms which overlap with dyspepsia, GERD or reflux hypersensitivity. Yes.
Another question that I want to ask you, Dr. Shrikant, through you is, what is the ideal time of giving a prokinetic in functional dyspepsia?
Ideally, it should be 30 minutes to 1 hour before food, so that it will start its work. Like levosulfide, it takes little more. So it should be started maybe 1 hour or 2 hours before food, because its peak effect is around 3 hours. So this is what, but if you start with Domstal or metoclopramide, then you can give 30 minutes to 1 hour before food.
Also, I want to ask both of you gentlemen and your insight into any central nervous side effects of levosulfide. We see some elderly people coming with confusion and at times with abnormal behavior with levosulfide. Your take on that?
Sir, there are reports where levosulfide has caused extrapyramidal symptoms, but it is extremely rare. And if you say that you want to avoid it in people above 60, I am with you, though data is lacking. But classically, it does not cross the blood-brain barrier and should not occur. But you are definitely right. In old age, we have seen people with extrapyramidal symptoms with levosulfide. Shrikant sir would enlighten me better with his vast experience.
As I told, this dopamine receptors are of 5 types: D1, D2 to 5. D1 and D5 are usually in the brain, and D2 is peripherally. D2, 3, 4, they act together like one type. So the
We lost you, Dr. Shrikant. We lost you.
We lost your signal. तो बोल रहे we lost you बोल रहा है.
सर ऐसे मत बोलो सर.
No, no, lost you, matlab lost your signal. Yeah, of course, yeah. We are talking about the signal here.
नहीं, obviously मजाक कर रहा हूँ, सर क्यों ऐसे बोल रहे
I can't be losing everyone, boss. I can't lose Physician Forum of India like this.
हैं? Srikanth sir, we lost you in between, sir. We lost your signal. Kindly repeat, sir.
डॉक्टर शुभम बता दें which prokinetic is having least extrapyramidal side effect?
Sir, acosciamide has no relation with any dopamine receptor. It is an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor which increases fundus relaxation and causes increased gastric emptying.
Sorry, sir. I was muted.
Oh,
Sir,
please
Poddar,
come in
sir.
again. We lost your signal, sir. Some people
Sorry,
had objection to my saying that we lost you. I wish you long life, sir, Dr. Shrikant, sir.
I am so sorry, sir. I am so sorry. So I think my A was clear, or in between it was
To
Yeah,
D5
your voice
कारण
is
कि
clear now.
D5 brain में मिलता है,
हाँ हाँ
चांसेस कम है.
हाँ, इसलिए स्पेसिफिक D2 इनहिबिटर अगर होगा तो ये पेरिफेरली काम करता है, तो इसमें चांसेस कम है कि टार्डिव डिस्काइनेसिया या देखा गया है, पर चांसेस बहुत बहुत कम है.
केस
क्या
रिपोर्ट
बोल रही है? क्या आंटी खड़ी है तो सुनेगी
Do
क्या
I
बोल
still
रही
have the
है?
advantage of the pattern of the forum, Dr. S.K. Mathur on the forum? Is he still there?
Good evening, sir. Sushil, a lovely talk on common symptom like this, dyspepsia, which every day we see. So I would like to compliment Dr. Shrikant and Shubham for a lovely talk. Is enlightening us for future treating the patient. We should be careful about starting. You rightly said as a prokinetic before giving the, I mean, both the drug has to be given in the right indications. And Dr. Shubham, you very well explained the indication. And we like to be, thank you for all. Thank you, Shubham. Thank you, Sushil. Thank you, Sri.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Shubham, may I, Dr.
Yeah. Go ahead, sir. Dr. Mangla, sir.
Dr.
Welcome,
Shubham,
sir.
one of my patient, I had sent him to gastroenterologist, and he had written this drug of accotiamide. And this patient came to me that, doctor, I have not been able to sleep. I have been coughing out tons of sputum. I've been coughing out tons of sputum. Was this the offending drug?
Sir, theoretically it is possible.
Have you found such a?
No, sir. I have not seen this. Theoretically, it is possible because it is an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. So it is going to increase acetylcholine, which is going to increase the parasympathetic activity, which is going to increase secretions. Parasympathetic is known to increase secretions everywhere, except maybe sweating, which is a sympathetic cholinergic pathway.
No, I'm just telling you that this patient came to me like that, and I asked the gastroenterologist that this could be the offending drug, and having stopped this drug, it got better.
Sir, there is definite possibility, but I have not seen this in my limited 2 years of private practice. Shrikant sir, bata
Maybe
sakte
this
hain.
was an asthmatic.
बेटे ये दो केस में से भर देना.
एकोसियामाइड बोल रहे हैं क्या सर आप?
हाँ जी, हाँ जी, हाँ जी.
हाँ, एकोसियामाइड में theoretically yes possible, because it will increase all the secretions. So if it will increase secretion from the bronchus, then definitely you can get that thing. Because acetylcholine usually increases all secretions from GI tract, from respiratory tract, and from urinary tract also. So that's why it is possible, but practically we don't get it. Reporting cases अगर आया है तो आप report कर सकते हैं इसको.
बिल्कुल. सर, मेरा एक friend है, Dr. Utsav Sahu. I think he joined us my talk for the first time. He's an endocrinologist working in North Delhi, I guess. And उसने पूछा can acosciamide and prucalopride or pruis be given together? तो yes, they can be given together. दोनों का वो मतलब function काफी अलग है. But prucalopride जो drug है, it mainly acts on the large intestine. It is not a prokinetic drug mainly for the stomach. So a patient having constipation and dyspepsia can be used.
In that case, I would request some more questions from anybody else. And if Dr. P.K. Gupta is around, the president of the forum. Sir, are you there? Dr. P.K. Gupta, sir? Dr. P.K. Gupta, sir, are you there? So he is not there. In that case, I would like Dr. Shrikant Sharma to please sum up this for us, for all of us. Dr. Shrikant, over to you, sir. Just sum up this for us, sir.
Actually, if any dyspepsia comes to us, then we should know that we have to exclude the organic dyspepsia like GERD, like any drug which is causing this. And if it is elderly, then malignancy, which is the chances of malignancy are maybe around 1% or less than that, but we have to exclude that. And very rightly, the red flag signs are told that any recent onset of dyspepsia or more than 50 years of 50 years age of dyspepsia, or first degree relative having carcinoma stomach, or any GI bleed, any anemia, any mass palpable in the stomach, any progressive dysphagia, odynophagia, any kind of recurrent vomiting, any lymphadenopathy palpable, this kind of thing, if there, then they are red flag signs. If they are excluded by any means, maybe endoscopy you can say, or by any means, then we can proceed further. And if like our area, H. pylori, which is prevalent, if we are doing endoscopy, we should do a biopsy from there to exclude this, or if necessary, we can go for this stool antigen test or breath test. Then we can treat it if antibiotics are necessary. If not, then we can see if there is postprandial distension or postprandial bothersome belching, then we can give prokinetics. If that will fail, maybe 4 to 8 weeks of trial will fail, then we can go for PPIs. If PPIs will fail, then we can go for antidepressants. If that also fails, then we can go for some pharmacological drug with psychiatric treatment. So this is the way Dr. Shubham also gave a very lucid and very clear-cut idea about this. I think this is sufficient too.
Yeah, Dr. Shrikant, one observation. I think most of the red flag signs for dyspepsia are also red flag signs for bleeding PR also. This is just an observation. If in painless bleeding per rectum, also almost red flag signs are same.
Thank you, Dr. Podar. Thank you, Dr. Podar, for your observation and your comments. I think it's time to wind up the webinar. It's my duty on behalf of Physician Forum of India to thank all the attendees. And also I would request Mr. Rakesh Sharma, thanking him with gratitude for arranging this webinar for us.